In the morning sun where the flowers bloom, colors blurs like a painter's dream come true. Roses red and violets blue, every petal whispers something new. From tiny seeds to trees so grand, every leaf and bird, it's all at hand. Hello, hello plant, welcome to the show, where every flower tells a story. Watch them grow. Hello, hello plant, in every shade and hue, for every heart and every hand, we've got something for you. Indoor greens and outdoor scenes, design your space, let your garden dreams glide. Personal touch with our garden design, free sessions to blend within your budget line. From tiny seeds to trees so grand, every leaf and bird, it's all at hand. Hello, hello plant, welcome to the show, where every flower tells a story. Watch them grow. Hello, hello plant, in every shade and hue, for every heart and every hand, we've got something for you. Now everybody, let's say hello, 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 hello. Hello, hello plant, welcome to the show, where every flower tells a story. Watch them grow. Hello, hello plant, in every shade and hue, for every heart and every hand, we've got something for you, just for you.
Hi everyone, I'm your host Danae and I'm here with Chris. On today's live, we're going to be chatting all about the 7 common garden design problems and their solutions. So if you don't know, we actually run our own free garden designs here in Hello Hello, where you get a dedicated portion of time to chat with Chris about your garden dreams, your vision, maybe even if you have no vision at all, you just want some help, got a project going on, and Chris brings his expert advice and his resourcefulness and helps you bring that garden to life. He's done, how many years have you been doing that for now, Chris?
Well, I attempted to get my first garden design when I was 11. And,
Whoa, very ambitious.
Yeah, it was actually, I was at St. Joseph's College in Ferntree Gully, and I went up to the headmaster and I said, it was Father O'Sullivan, and I said to him, I said, look, I think I could design the garden here and make it look better than what it does.
And he was really enthusiastic
No,
about
he
that?
patted me on the head and said he'd think about it. I never spoke to me. I'm still waiting for him to come back to me.
We're still waiting. You never know. You never know.
Yeah, so at any rate, yeah, so that was my first. I looked at the garden there and I got an idea and I thought I could do something there. And yeah.
Well, at least you've gotten to do many other gardens.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we wanted to create this live to just kind of cover those common problems. If you didn't want to come in for a garden design, you could take these tips and tricks and just apply it to your own garden and just come up with your own project.
Yeah, what I was really hoping to do, I do about 30 garden designs a week for people, and it's quite hard work. And what I thought I might be able to do is I thought I might be able to really show people how mentally the process that I go through in different situations, so that people could actually solve some of their own garden design problems at home. That was what I. So if you're listening today, what I'm hoping is that you'll you'll learn how to ask yourself the questions that I would ask you, that narrows down the choices and allows you to design it yourself. Yeah.
Exactly, sounds perfect. And if you have any questions at all, put them in the comments and we will dedicate some time at the end to answer all of them. So without further ado, let's get right into it. What's number one, Chris?
Okay, I get several a week. Would be one of the most common problems is I want to go on the market. I want to put my house up for sale. And mostly when people do it, they're kind of wanting to, they've got the person come around to take the photos next week. That's the normal situation. So I want to go on the market soon. But in actual fact, what I want to say is that the longer you, or the sooner that you plan before you go on the market, the longer time. Like a lot of people are going to go on the market in October, November. Now's a great time to get into it because we can choose things and have, quite small plants and have them grow and flower in the next couple of months. So
and it'll save you money then because you're buying smaller plants.
Save your time, money and effort if you plan ahead, but it's still very common that people come in and say, look, they're coming on a Saturday morning, they've got the photographer coming on Tuesday, and we've got to deliver the goods. And that's the most common situation. So that's what I'm going to focus on today. Now, when somebody comes in and they said they're going on the market, my first question, well, actually the first thing is some people come in, they say they want to design, and I start designing something that could be good for them in a year or two, and then they say, no, I'm going on the market. So first thing is tell me you're going on the market. Next thing is, when you tell me you're going to go on the market, my first question is going to be when. What's the date? When are you starting? Because I might have things that are beautifully in flower at the moment that you're going on the market in 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. They might be kind of finished, and so I'd hate you to spend money on that. Whereas I might have something that's budded and ready to go and going to be fabulous at the time. So my very first question is when, and it's always when. So I'm going on the market and I say when, and then I start thinking, well, like sometimes people come in autumn and they're looking at deciduous trees, and I say, when are you going to the market? And they say June. I say, no, you can't have them. We've got to go evergreen. So the first question is when, and then the second thing, in actual fact, it's funny, when I was about 17, I first left school, there was a property boom up in the hills, and properties that had been abandoned that were kind of worthless were suddenly worth money, and the local real estate agent was being contacted by people that had abandoned properties up in the hills, and they'd all had long grass and all messed up and everything like that. And the local real estate agent was hiring me to fix up properties and make them saleable. And at any rate, my thing was that we were doing on super low budgets, and my thing was purely subtraction. So the first step is subtraction. And this is where people could use some help. I mean, you could get your mother, your brother, whatever, or you could get your nurseryman or whatever. But what happens is that you've been living there for years, you've been looking at it for years, and there's some real ugliness there that you can't see anymore. So you need someone to take another view, and the first thing that I like to do, and it could be just like a couple of branches that were hacked off a tree and not done nicely that need trimming off nicely. It could be a hole in the lawn, and you need to buy a bit of turf and repair that hole in the lawn. But basically, my first thing, and very often people need, they've got all stained concrete, and they need to, and these things you can't see, like the concrete over 20 years just gradually darker and darker and darker, and you might need a pressure blaster to blast the concrete paths or the fences or something like that. So basically, first thing is, and subtraction is cheaper than addition. So the first thing is to get someone to help you take a look and pick out the ugliest thing, the second ugliest thing, the third ugliest thing, the fourth ugliest thing, and start subtracting. And so subtraction is normally cheaper and easier and quicker than adding to cover up. So subtraction, I think, is really, really important. And that's what I do when the customer comes in. I want to look at photos, and I'll say, let's get rid of that, let's get rid of that, let's get rid of those. They've gone out of fashion. Well, let's get rid of that. And with subtraction, you've got to be like, big bushes are very, very expensive. So a big bush that's not quite right but not terrible, you might just want to keep it because the big bushes are quite expensive. So you don't overdo the subtraction. Just get rid of the really ugly, the things that are devaluing. And what you've got to think of is that a person's going to drive up to your place and they're going to look and they're going to get some sort of an opinion or thought in the first couple of seconds. You might have a fabulous kitchen, but if you've got some ugly hacked up bush out the front, they're going to form this opinion that's going to kind of cloud when they see your kitchen. They sort of still be looking at your kitchen through that ugly bush.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So-
First impressions.
Yeah, so really work on that first impression. And I think one of the things that people ignore that is really important is the nature strip, and like at the moment it's just starting to warm a little bit, and there's a thing called annual ryegrass. Now, annual ryegrass will germinate right now. So if you haven't got a big budget and you've got holes in the lawn, wheel marks all over the nature strip, a bit of annual rye can turn it green in about 14 days at the moment, and once the weather warms up, it'll turn it green in 7 days. So you can
Pretty
actually,
impressive.
and what you do is you just rake out a bit of potting mix over. You mow the lawn, rake out a bit of potting mix over the whole lawn, and then you go and you seed the lawn with some annual rye. Or a mixture of annual and perennial rye, and it comes up in very, very cold conditions, and you can basically turn areas green. And I think that, so repair, and then once it gets up and gets going, most people cut their lawn too tall. When you've got young, tender grass, get your mower up as high as you can, mow it often, but mow it high. And so repairing the lawn, and particularly the nature strip, because just think, like, in fact, what you should do is you should actually pretend that you're a buyer and pull up at the front of your place and take a look and say, wow, there's a hole in the lawn there and that bush looks terrible. And agapanthus are hideously out of fashion. I've got to get rid of those agapanthus.
Exactly. And you'll
Yeah.
be surprised how much the value of your property goes up once your garden's looking nice.
Yeah, well, my daughter and her girlfriend, they got a mate of mine who's a really good real estate agent to value their property, and they had another property they wanted to buy. And at any rate, they'd been renting out their property for a few years, and it was looking a bit sad. And he came out and he valued it, and the valuation was way too low. They weren't able to buy the other property with that valuation. They couldn't buy the other property they wanted. And what they did was that they were working for me at the time. They stopped working for me for 2 weeks. They just disappeared, and they worked away chainsawing, raking, burning, cleaning, removing, adding, and they went 2 weeks, the two of them, and I think they added about 30% onto it. They got the same agent back, had it revalued, and added about 30% on it, and sold it quite promptly for about 30% more than what he valued it at when it had been
Whoa.
rented. And so, and that was a significant amount of money, and it put them into that better property that they wanted.
That's incredible. We do have some questions. I do just want to make a quick note. For anyone asking questions kind of unrelated to garden designs, we'll see if we get some time to answer them at the end, but we do actually have a dedicated live Q&A every Monday, 12 p.m. for all of your gardening and plant questions. We'll try and get to them at the end if we have the time. But yeah, just please do keep that in mind. Also, if any questions are urgent, of course, you can call, email, come in store. I do have a question here from Al Ruff though. Just asking, what happens if we need structures or water features? Does Chris have contacts with those? Got any contacts, Chris?
A little bit, yeah. A little
Some
bit.
slight
Yeah,
contacts,
I
okay.
Yeah, I direct people all over the place, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, interesting, yeah. And good luck, Al Ruff, with your back garden in your townhouse. Sounds like it's a good idea to do it in stages so it's not too much,
Yeah,
too
that's a
exhausting
great
all at
idea,
once.
doing it on a gradient.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here we are, we're putting the house on the market. We've determined the date. We've repaired the lawn. We've removed the ugly agapanthus and that ugly hacked up old bush. Now the next stage is to say what's needed and wanted. And basically, the mistake that a lot of people make at this point is that they come into the nursery and they say, look, I really like weeping peach trees, for instance. But it's not what you like, it's what the broad market like. Like I've found that almost everybody likes magnolias, and they particularly like evergreen magnolias. So if you, instead of going for weeping peaches, which 1 in 1,000 people like, an evergreen magnolia, 9 out of 10 people reckon they're a good plant. So if you use, and so what I tend to recommend are the plants that I know that nearly every customer will find acceptable. And then the other thing is that you need to do the garden, but you're kind of not going to get you're not going to, if you spend a fortune on the garden, you're going to lose it. So what you've got to do is you've got to buy plants that are on special. And what you'll find on any day of the week, you'll find some big bushy things, and maybe they're at the back of the nursery, and you get the nurseryman to help you get out the back and get those big bushy specials. And it's not what you like; it's what the average person likes. Which also, the average person's not a fool. So you don't. There's certain things that everybody hates, like 99% of people don't like yuccas anymore. So even if yuccas are going for $2 each and they're 6 foot tall, don't touch them. So you need to look for that bargain, but it's got to be that bargain that the bulk of people like. So a Pittosporum, a nice big bushy Pittosporum, bulk of people go for them. Nice big bushy evergreen magnolia, great choice. Weeping cherries, everybody loves them, and as we come into spring and they come into blossom, they're a good economical feature plant to put in the front. English box, almost everybody reckons they're pretty good. So an English box tend to be fairly cheap, like you get quite big ones fairly cheap. So English box are a great choice. So basically, look for bargains, don't spend a fortune, and things like, then finish it off with a bit of nice fresh mulch. And you don't have to put on real thick, just a nice thin layer of nice mulch, and don't. I've never seen a garden look better with red mulch on it. Red mulch, it looks like nuclear waste to me, and I go for black mulch. I go for pebbles, but pebbles can be expensive, so really only use them when you have to. Black mulch, pebbles, and pine bark mulch is good in some circumstances. Because black isn't good everywhere, but never use red mulch. I'm sure you
red mulch.
Yeah, you'll lose $5,000 or $10,000 off the value of your house just by putting red mulch out the front.
Also, a little bit of a promo. We do have some really good sales going on at the nursery too. Be getting those bargains, like our winter clearance sale.
Yeah, that's right. Well, so yeah, right now is a great time. If you were selling your place, right now is a great time. What you'll find lots of biggish plants going fairly cheap. And so it's a really good time to get in and
love it. Get your plants.
And get your garden ready for spring sales.
All right, let's move on to number 2.
Your property ready. So the next thing is the sunshade situation. Lots and lots of these days you've got situations where there's 2-story houses next door. There's 2-story houses next door. There's a great big tree out the front, and half of the garden's in hot sun and the other half of the garden's in shade, and that's a big problem, because some plants are shade loving and some plants are sun loving. And so if you were to plant sun lovers, and like I say you had a big tree out the front of your house, and this end of that front is in sun and this end's in the shade, if you plant a sun lover, you'll find it won't grow properly up the shady end, and it'll look terrible there. And so what you need to do, and it's probably the sort of thing that's good to get a little bit of advice if you need it, but I'll go through my favourite plants for using in that sunshade situation, like say sweet viburnum. Sweet viburnum, great in the sun, great in the shade. And so you can make, if you had that big tree there and you want to make a nice even hedge that goes all the way through, if you were to put Photinia or ficus there, you're going to have a hedge like that, and then the hedge is going to dip when it goes into the shade. It's going to be really poor there. But if you do, say, sweet viburnum, it'll grow 90-95% as well and look very similar in both sun and shade. Another really good one for that is English box. And I remember there was a restaurant up at Mount Dandenong, and it had a big oak tree with an English box hedge that was under, and the oak tree was a really dense, big, bushy old oak tree, and under the oak tree there was a hedge, and the hedge went right out into the car park where it was really hot and sunny. And what was great, I used to look at that hedge when I was there, and you could really see no difference in the English box where it was in the shade or whether it was in the sun. Where even Dutch box, I've seen the same situation with Dutch box, and it's only half the size and a whole different colour when it's in the shade and the sun. And another really good example is Chinese star jasmine. There's gardens that I've seen where you've got great big trees. You see it right around Turak and things like that. Great big trees, and some areas you've got burning hot sun, and then over here you've got deep shade. And Chinese star jasmine done as a ground cover, or Asiatic jasmine does as a ground cover, thrives in either sun or shade. It looks kind of the same. So if you've got a big area and you want that whole area to look even, you'll find sun or shade. Your Chinese star jasmine or your Asiatic jasmine will do really, really well. And
And it smells really good.
yeah, beautiful fragrance in summer, but a very useful thing, because lots of times, you know, if you're looking for a ground cover under a tree, you'll find that on this side it's hot and sunny, this side it's shady, and the Asiatic or Chinese star jasmine will look after both sides really, really well. So there's some plants that do really well in the sun and the shade, and that's a sort of problem that you can tackle and get, because these days, like going back in the 60s and 70s, people used to go down to the nursery and they'd buy a plant and say, well, that looks nice, and they'd take it home, they'd put it in the garden, and then they'd get another plant and they'd say, that looks nice, and they'd end up with 30 or 40 different plants in the garden that really didn't work together at all. And individually, when you went out and looked at them, when they flowered or did whatever they did, they looked nice, but the garden itself just looked like a collection, just some plants. And whereas these days, what I would consider to be the kind of the modern style is where people are using less different plants and mass planting, and that sunshade problem is like, rather than do something different there, it really adds to the style to have a theme and to have less different plants, you know. And you probably notice yourself that when you're driving through a nice suburb and you see a really nice garden, count up the number of plants you see in that garden. You'll notice that if it's very stylish, there could be as little as 3 different plants and maybe as much as 6 or 7, but not much more than that. So limiting that number, and that's why you need that plant that'll do sun and shade when you're doing and like ficus is one that really loves the sun, and lots of people plant ficuses where they might be hot and sunny there, and then they've got they use them in the city a lot, and where they've got a big 2-story or 3-story building here and a big patch of permanent shade, and the ficus will always fail or do really, really poorly once you get up to that shady section. So ficus is an example of what you shouldn't be planting in hot sun or shade. And when people talk to me about ficus hedges, I always ask them about the sun-shade situation, and if it ain't all sun, I don't sell them ficus.
Very smart. All right, we're going to move on to the third problem.
Yeah, so the third problem, and this would perhaps be more common than people who are putting their place on the market. I reckon I almost get a person a day that is wanting to get some privacy. They've got they maybe bought the place 20 years ago, and units have gone up next door, and they're 8-9 meters tall, and there's people looking in at them in their swimming pool and things like that, and they want some privacy. And so my first question would be, it's back to the sunshade situation, is it sunny or shady? Is it morning sun or afternoon sun? And then I would tend to choose. Now, if it was shady, probably my favourite hedge would be a sweet viburnum in the shade. Also, I'm rather fond of fastigiate English box. I did a garden design yesterday, and they had a south-facing house, and we needed something up against the house. I didn't use it as a hedge, but I could have used it as a hedge, but that we wanted something up against the house with a bit of height, but not too big, not too crazy, and we used a thing called a fastigiate English box, which is a tall, skinny English box. And so their fastigiate English box or sweet viburnum, and the other one, more aggressive and bigger and faster growing, is a cherry laurel, is another one that is very good for shade. And the other interesting one that I found really good for shade is that there's a thing called a creeping saltbush, and your creeping saltbush, lovely silver grey, grows about 1.5, 1.6 metres tall, trims and shapes up beautifully, and grows in complete shade. So they're a couple of plants that are really good in the shade for a screen, and for the tallest of those shade lovers would be your cherry laurel. The second tallest would be the sweet viburnum. But then the next thing, say we've got sun. Now, something that people don't really like to look at, they're not that popular to look at, but very, very practical. If I've got elderly people coming in and they want to screen out, and often a lot of elderly people do come in and they've been living there for years, and suddenly there's big tall units going in next door, and I know that you don't want to send those elderly people up a ladder. And so if you don't want to send them up a ladder, what you would offer them is one of two trees. You would either offer them a Glauca pencil pine. Now Glauca pencil pines within 5 years can grow 9 metres tall and block out probably a 3 or 4 story building. But they don't have that lush look of say a ficus or a sweet viburnum or something like that. But they're very, very practical because they never get more, once they get up high, they never get more than a metre wide. And so they're a column, so no one's ever going to have to say, look, the branches are coming over into my place and you've got to trim up your hedge there, mate, and you've got to go up 6 or 7 or 8 metres in the air on a ladder or hire some sort of an access point or something like that. So a little bit boring to look at, but very, very practical and very sensible if you don't want to, you know, in your old age be climbing up tall ladders and trimming things, is your Glauca pencil pine. And Glauca pencil pines are really fast growing, they're really, really tough. I think when they're young, and with plenty of water and fertiliser and well planted, you can probably almost get 1.5 metres a year out of your Glauca pencil pine. And then if you wanted one that wasn't quite as tall, and maybe a little bit fatter but still with a natural sort of shape in it, your Spartan conifer is, I call the Spartan conifer your fat pencil pine. Loves a trim. You can make it thinner, you can chop the top off it, and that's the same thing when Glauca pencil pines hit the height you want, you can easily chop the top off those. So they're very good. Glauca and Spartan's a little bit fatter, a little bit shorter. They're really good if you wanted to screen out, you know, tall buildings or some tall monstrosity next door. If you want to screen them out, but you don't want to go up on a ladder, they're the ones to get. But other ones that are really, really good is your Leighton's green cypress. Now, if you go down to the Kooyong tennis court, on the right-hand side of the old tennis court there's an amazing Leighton's green cypress hedge, and it's about 5 or 6 metres tall. It's only about 1 metre wide. And so Leighton's green are fabulous for making a tall, narrow hedge because they have a single straight, where a lot of things fork and grow like that and get wider and wider and wider. Your Leighton's green has a single straight leader up the middle with branches coming out radially. And if you cut those branches, you can make an amazing tall, narrow hedge. And the thing with the Leighton's green cypress, they're I'm probably getting a bit technical now, but they're an interspecies hybrid. A bit like a mule is a cross between a horse and a donkey. It's like a mule type thing, and because it is that type of hybrid, it has enormous hybrid vigour. And the best, I had a customer once who was experimenting with how to grow them on his farm the best possible way, and he achieved 7.5 metres in 3 years with Leighton's green cypress. That was in very good
pretty
conditions.
Impressive.
Yeah, good water and soil and things like that. So Leighton's green is one of the fastest and one of the most trimmable conifers on the market. It's much, much easier to trim than, say, a Macrocarpus cypress. So Leighton's green, fabulous thing for a tall screen.
Any other options?
Yeah, and then apart from that, you've got probably one of my favourites is your weeping lily pilly. Your weeping lily pilly loves to be trimmed, really easy to manage. There's a bit of a beetle going around eating a lot of the lily pillies. Like I used to, you know, do lots of the neighbours behind lily pilly, but unfortunately the beetles are eating that. But the beetles don't like the weeping lily pilly, but the weeping lily pilly, really luscious look to it, so really good tall. And then of course there's your ficus, and your ficus flash is very popular, and the reason why they call it flash is it comes up in a flash, and I reckon they're probably capable under ideal conditions of almost 2 metres of growth in a year.
Whoa.
So ficus flash, fabulous. Bit of an aggressive root system, don't put it right up against the house, and you need to possibly contain the size of it a bit to stop the roots and trunk getting too big. But fabulous,
amazing. All right.
fast grower.
Let's move on to number 4 then.
Okay, so the next, apart from blocking out the neighbours, the next most common thing I'm asked for is extra low maintenance. People, there's lots of people who, I mean, you know, they got kids. They got
work full time.
Got
a busy life.
Yeah, whole couple working full time. Like to play a bit of golf on the weekend. Ain't got time to garden. And what a lot of people are asking for is an ultra low maintenance garden. And the thing is, what's great is that it is important. Like as a Christmas present for my in-laws a couple of years ago, they had an ultra high maintenance garden, and I took a professional gardener, my partner and I went round there, and we worked for about 4 solid hours trimming all of their out of control yuccas and trimming the whole garden, and then we loaded up a big 10-ton truck full of rubbish, which would have cost quite a few $100s to take to the tip, and if I added up the value of the labour, and we had 2 chainsaws going, and like monstrous maintenance job, and the thing is that I worked it out that if you had some sort of a gardening contractor to do that and remove the rubbish, you're probably talking about a $2,000 to $3,000 job, and most pensioners couldn't afford something like that. So when you're getting on a bit, it might pay to, or even if you're not getting on, just you're busy, no one, it might pay to really look at low maintenance. And with low maintenance, there's plants like one of my favourites is cousin-it, and cousin-it just grows flat on the ground, cascades over edges. There's trees like grafted standard weeping trees that just hang down and they don't grow up and get up in the power lines or anything like that. So a nurseryman or a designer like myself, if you come in and say low maintenance is what I want, we can show you plants that are skinny to go as hedges along the edge and you don't have to trim them. We can show you plants that grow flat on the ground. We can show you bushes that just stay little and round and don't need trimming. We can show you trees that grow up and then are grafted up high and just cascade down. So basically, the trick I call it self-shaping. What you want for super low maintenance is you want self-shaping plants, and you want plants that don't get any diseases or not particularly attracted to bugs so that they need spraying. And the nurseryman has lots of, these days there's more plants at my disposal that would fit that low maintenance category than I've ever seen before. So lots and lots of things like a golf ball potassium just grows into a lovely round ball that doesn't shoot up and go all over the place. Things like an emerald green hebe, which just is beautiful like a little green basketball, just grows into like a fabulous little green basketball. And one of my favourites is a thing called lime lava, which is Australian native, which grows like a little beautiful little green pillow. Really gorgeous. And then there's lots and lots of grasses that don't die and drop seeds and do all sorts of crazy stuff, and they just stay, they're green or they're variegated and they're just nice little shapes. And the trick is that I guess some things that look cute in the nursery might grow into sort of monsters, and other things, that's probably the low maintenance is probably the area where you might need to come in and get a little help from the nurseryman so that he can show you these plants. But there's a range of plants in your modern nursery that are self-shaping and very, very hardy, disease resistant. We've got better plants than ever before at our disposal for that really low maintenance garden.
Amazing. And we also got a great section on the website as well. It's all about low maintenance plants if you want to have a scroll through the website.
Yeah.
Right, on to number 5.
Okay, so small gardens. Now, it's a funny thing. I get lots of people in with a little tiny garden. It might be like a little, these days there's front gardens that I'm looking at that are about the size of a car park or even a fraction smaller, or there'll be in the back of a townhouse, there'll be a little tiny square of soil. And it can take me quite a while to design those, because what it is that how I go about that is I'll talk to the customer and I'll say, whereabouts do you view this from? And they might look at it out the bedroom window, out their lounge room window, or look at it from their kitchen. And I look at, my first thing is I look at where are they going to view it from, and then I find out what's important to them. And it can, even with that tiny pocket handkerchief, it can be just low maintenance that they want, or they might want colour. A lot of people in those little things want a sort of a Japanese style garden or a Zen style garden, and I find that it's that those small spaces often lend themselves to that sort of Zen style garden. And then you look at the sunshade aspect, and then once you so you've looked at the wants and needs and budget of the customer, you've looked at the sort of style, and you've also looked at, often it's good with that, you might say you're looking at it through the kitchen, it's even good to have a look at that space from where a person working at the kitchen bench would be looking at it from. So I love to see a photo of looking across the kitchen bench at that little space, and I'll design, so I like to design that space from that viewpoint. And generally the choosing of plants, because you can't, I'm not going to use too many different plants in that spot, and so there could be one tree there, and so the choosing of that tree can be very, very important, because say for instance you put just like I'd be unlikely in a spot like that to use a flowering cherry, because a flowering cherry, although it's fabulous in flower in springtime, a little bit boring the rest of the year. I'd be much more likely to use something like one of my two favourite plants for that tiny garden, that little tiny single tree in that spot. Actually, I'll probably go with my three favourite plants. My three favourite plants would be a crepe myrtle, and I love crepe myrtles because they have beautiful sort of beautiful patterns on the bark in the winter when they're bare. They right in the heat of summer when everything else is knocked off flowering, they're covered in massive, beautiful blossom. And then just straight after the blossom, they go into fabulous autumn colour, and they hold that autumn colour for a couple of months. So really, they're a tree that is giving off some sort of beauty, and they're a lovely sort of oriental kind of shape. So they give off that beauty all year round. And then if you were to Google Senkaku maple and and just pull up images and look at all 40 or 50 images that are there, you'll think you've made some sort of mistake, because there's all these different colours there. And so you're Senkaku maple, beautiful crimson stems in the winter when it's bare, crimson and green and sort of maidenhair and green in the spring, and then all sorts of pinks and oranges and all sorts of other colours all through the year. So that's another what I'd call hard-working small tree, crepe myrtle and Senkaku maple. But there's other trees as well. And so what I look for is I look for something that does something. And then I really like the princess gum. The princess gum lends itself to being pruned. It's got big silver nuts, red flowers and long grey foliage, and it's a little bit see-through. It's not sort of too overpowering. So that's another tree that I love to use in a small space. So that's the sort of thing that, and then from there, some nice little combination and then I like bushes like kaleidoscope or Laura Petalum Bob's Pink. Kaleidoscope's lovely round golden bush. Bob's Pink is a lovely little rounded compact purple burgundy bush with pink flowers. And so they're the sort of things, and then I'd use that with some nice like black mondo or stripy white liriope and just nice little colourful and interesting plants. Your Irish moss is lovely in a situation like that. So they're the sorts of plants that I'll tend to use in that small garden. But I take my time and choose more carefully when I'm just dealing with a tiny space, because that space has to work a lot harder than a bigger space.
Amazing. All right, we're going to move on to number 6 now. We're almost there at the end.
Yeah. Now, I love the challenge of a tight budget, and because. And I love it when somebody comes in and they want a nice garden and their budget is super duper tight. And I've over the years I've done some amazingly cheap gardens. I remember one time I was looking for work as a landscaper when I was in my early 20s, and a lady wanted her front garden redone, and she only had $20. And I thought, well, I'm unemployed today. I'd be better off to have the experience of doing this garden and just get $20. Than to be just, and this was quite a few years ago when $20 could probably buy a tank of petrol or something. But
could not do that nowadays.
No.
Impossible.
But anyway, what was interesting was that I took some cuttings and things out of my garden. I dug up her lawn and moved. She had an awful square garden bed, and I dug it up and covered up that with pieces of lawn and dug out a nicely shaped thing. I pinched some soil from some roadside works. And I took cuttings and things out of my own garden, and at the end of the day she had a nice little kidney-shaped garden out the front that looked a heap better than the old square garden bed, with some nice little plants in it that I'd moved, and I basically did it all. I did it all just with odds and ends and bits and pieces, and so really I guess doing it with I think just because you haven't got any money or much money, you shouldn't not do the garden. What I do, if somebody has got a really, really tight budget, we've got 3-inch pots out there, and we've got an incredible range of them, and they're $4.99 each, and we'd have 50, 60 different sorts of plants out there, and I can put together a nice little garden with those plants quite easily. But one of the ways to get your garden done on a budget, like this week we're going to have, for $59.99, we're going to have a 6-foot weeping birch. Now, mostly a 6-foot weeping birch is around $200, but I'm clearing a heap for a chap, and we've got them for $59.99. And so if you came in, and a weeping silver birch is a fabulous centerpiece for a garden. So if you came in and bought just that this week and planted it, you would have a weeping birch that would normally cost a couple of $100. You'd have it out the front there. And the best way is to come in and pick the bargains. And most nurseries, and particularly our nursery, tends to, some bloke will ring up and say, Chris, I need you to clear the blah, blah, blahs. I've got 100 of them, I've got 200 of them I want to clear. And so if you, and then that could suit your budget, because you might only be able to find 10 or 15 or 20 or 50 or $100, whatever, spare at a time. And then if you come down and you go right through the nursery and you relentlessly track down the bargains, you can make a beautiful garden. And I've had lots of customers do that over the years. But so like this week, it's a weeping birch for $59.99. And we've got lots and lots of nice little cottage plants at the $4.99. And we were tossing out some fruit trees that had lost their labels last week for $5 each. So if you take your time and cash in on the bargains, you could build a fabulous garden over a bit of time, and that garden could be a bit of fun. Like it just make a bit of fun out of it, and take your time. I reckon that's a really good way to do a garden on a tight budget. Don't do it all on the one day.
Yeah, sounds amazing. Now that means we've come to lucky number last, 7. Now what is number 7?
Number 7 is ultra modern. And ultra modern, I would call that minimalistic. And so
we just have a quick question here from Lisa, asking if there's a delivery service if we buy lots of plants, and yes, there is. We do have a free delivery service to obviously certain areas, and I think it's if you spend over $300.
Yeah, if you spend over $300, we deliver up as far as we do it for free up as far as Terrelgan, up as far as Shepparton, and Bendigo, and Ballarat, and down to Geelong, and a little bit beyond Geelong. We all of that is free when you spend over $300. So it's the main built-up areas of Victoria.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, let's keep going.
Yeah. So ultra modern is like your minimalistic kind of landscape, and there, actually, a mate of mine he was a sheep farmer. At any rate, he gave his farm over to his kids, and he went off to landscape architecture school for a couple of years. And I bumped into him after he'd completed his course, and I said to him, what did you learn at landscape architecture school? He said, I learned to only put 3 species in any one vista. I said, what else did you learn? He said, nothing much. And so at any rate, that was 3 years of landscape architecture at school, and I picked it up in a couple of minutes. And but anyway, what's interesting about that is that with some of your spectacular modern landscape architecture, you're starting to see beautiful minimalistic gardens. Now, you have to choose that garden really, really well, and you will see gardens with as little as 3 different plants in them. And I often do gardens like that with these really modern, stylish homes. And the sort of plants that I might use is something like a Canary Island ivy lawn. And instead of having a patch of lawn and some garden beds, you can just do the whole front garden except where the paths and things are, and just do the whole thing in Canary Island ivy. Then you might use something a bit spectacular, you know, in the tree sense, and you might plant some crepe myrtles, some nice white flowering natchez crepe myrtles or something like that, with lovely multi-trunk ones with, you know, beautiful multi-trunks and that, and get a bit of style, put those out there. And then you can use something like some English box ball sculptures, and use you know, great big ones and little ones and medium ones and things like that to the front, and the crepe myrtles to the back, and Canary Island ivy lawn. Now what's interesting is that anybody can do a garden like that and do it really, really easily. And if you were to drive, say, up, the best place to go look at minimalistic modern gardens would be to drive up Hopeton Avenue in Toorak, and probably one of the most expensive streets in Toorak. And what's interesting is that they haven't used super expensive plants. They've used your Chinese star jasmine, they've used your English box, they've used Canary Island ivy, lots and lots of Canary Island ivy. They've used crepe myrtles, silver birches. But what they tend to do, the modern look is not many different sorts of plants, but what you do use, you mass plant it. So there might be 7 or 8 or 9 silver birches on the front lawn, all planted casually, and then you might have something like Chinese star jasmine underneath, and then just 1 or 2 other sorts of plants planted with it, all mass planting and designed to create a real spectacle, and to add to your modern architecture. So that type of thing, you know, the mass planting really adds to your modern architecture. And areas of paving, and you can still use lawns, but if it's a tiny area or even a medium-sized area, it's best to use some sort of other type of lawn, like your Canary Island ivy lawn or like your Chinese star jasmine, and that's a way to get your and the other thing I'm noticing lately is that people are doing kind of like sculptures. They do, like, instead of just like English box balls are a bit of a fashion at the moment, but what the next step on from there is where you might grow a green coprosma or a cotton Easter damarai, and cut it into just a large freeform shape, and then grow a couple of maples in amongst it. Grow 4 or 5 you know, I've seen gardens where you've just got pebbles or river sand, you've got a couple of large sort of interesting sculptural rounded shapes, and then a couple of Japanese maples or crepe myrtles or something like that just planted in amongst it, and that can make a really spectacular garden in a where you've got some, you know, some interesting modern architecture.
Sounds amazing. So that's a wrap on the 7 garden design problems and their solutions. Amazing. Thank you everyone for coming and listening. We would really appreciate it if you tell your loved ones, tell anyone else that's trying to get into gardening about these lives that we do. We always do a weekly Monday live Q&A where you can come with all of your questions, and we dedicate that entire time to just answering them live here. And then we do lecture style lives like this one that we've done today. We've got a really exciting one coming up next week. We still got to lock it in, so we won't quite spoil it yet, but keep an eye on our socials. It's really exciting. And that's probably will be about Tuesday, 12 p.m. But of course, just keep an eye on our socials. We'll let you know what's going on there. Sorry for the questions that we couldn't get to. I will just quickly ask Len's question, just because it was relevant to what we were chatting about today. You briefly mentioned, I believed, a weeping silver birch bare rooted, and they were just asking if it's the Betula pendula young eye that you were talking about.
Yes, that's what I was talking about, was the young eye. And what it is you've got your Betula pendula, which is a tree that grows up quite tall and cascades down all the way, and then you've got your young eye, and your young eye is being grown up 5 or 6 foot in height. The ones that we've got are 6 foot, and then you graft it. They grow the ordinary pendula, and then they graft the young eye onto the top, and the young eye then just goes cool and just cascades to the ground. And I love they're a great birch because they grow good in a modern garden. They grow great in a cottage garden. They look good with an old-fashioned place. You know, so they're a very versatile tree. They have a sort of a softness to them. They look good all year round because they have the lovely white trunk.
Great. And do the leaves of the weeping birch keep falling?
No. What'll happen is that they'll hang on really, really well, and then they'll all start to fall in about May.
Okay. Right, well, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, once again for coming. And yeah, we really want to grow our community of gardeners, so please spread the word. And we will see you hopefully next Monday. Please come with all the questions that you asked today, and we will dedicate all our time to answering them. All right, see ya.
Bye.